I'm not hearing you, Morgan. Are you talking?
Yeah, same. Wayne, can you hear me though?
I can hear you. Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, we're good.
Awesome.
It would help if
Nice,
I were
like-
not double muted. Can you
All
hear
right,
me?
there we go. It's double mute. I was worried. I wasn't sure. All right, we're good. Wayne cracked the code. There it is.
All right.
Awesome.
And let's see if our other panelists are coming in. Neka said that she was in, but I don't see how to add her here.
When
Yeah,
they
this
request
was,
to share screen, they should pop up. I think when they request to share screen, it should pop up.
Okay.
Yeah, this was exciting. Trying to get in.
Catherine says that she's requested. So I do not see her request. Motivation panel. What did they say about the best laid plans of mice and men? Okay. Hi, Catherine.
There she is.
Yes,
I did exactly the same thing, and now it worked. Okay.
And then finally, Ms. Megwa.
Yeah, NECA has to do the same thing. Okay.
All right. For those of you, because I do believe we are live, please bear with us for just another couple of moments and I think we are all here.
just in time.
Just in time.
So what I will say on the way in for those who are for those of our guests who are paying attention is that our technical difficulties should not be perceived as an indicator of our technical acumen on the cloud security side. Thank you for bearing with us. We'll go ahead and dive right in. So greetings all. My name is Morgan Tucker. I am Accenture Security's North America lead for inclusion, diversity, and belonging. And I am joined today by four of my colleagues who are senior leaders in Accenture's Global Intelligent Cloud Infrastructure Security practice. I will introduce them momentarily, but just to set the table here, we are here to talk cloud security today. And while cloud does offer new opportunities to modernize services and transform operations, security and compliance risks remain the greatest barrier to cloud adoption. The complexity of hybrid and multi-cloud environments and a shortage of skills globally exacerbates these issues. They can be major roadblocks to a cloud-first journey. So today we have with us a number of Accenture's foremost experts in securing the journey to cloud, and you'll get to hear from them about how across the major cloud service providers, Accenture Security is turning what could be a major inhibitor to the cloud-first journey into a major business accelerator and enabler. So over the next 45 minutes, we'll uncover the foundational elements needed to securely migrate and decrypt our recipe for resilience. My colleagues will share how to get the most from cloud providers to make your business more secure, including successfully embedding zero trust principles to secure users, data, and devices. So today I am joined, as I said, by four of my Accenture Security colleagues. Neka Megwa is our Global Managing Director for Google Cloud Platform Security. Catherine Goolsvig-Wood is an Associate Director in Accenture Security, and she leads our Accenture Secure Cloud offering. Wayne Matadine is Accenture's Managing Director for Global Infrastructure Security, and he leads our Adaptive Zero Trust Architecture offering. And finally, Isaac Zapata is a Senior Manager in Accenture Security, and he's our North America lead for AWS Security. So between these four, you're looking at well over a half a century of in the trenches information security expertise. And I can't think of a better group to drive this conversation. In terms of the format for today's conversation, I'll start with a couple of questions for all of the panelists. We'll go around the horn to set the table, so to speak. After that, we'll have a round of more focused questions, hearing from each of our panelists on a question specific for each one of them. We'll segue to question and answer period for our guests, because this time is for you. And then we will segue to one closing question, the answers to which I believe will really speak to some of the questions and concerns that you, the audience, may have about how you can be thinking about securing your own operations, your own organization's journey to cloud, rather. And we hope that during the course of the conversation, certainly during the Q&A, that you will feel free to unmute and come on camera if that functionality is available to you. I believe it is. So let's go ahead and jump in. Panelists, to state the obvious, businesses have been drawn to the efficiency, elasticity, and innovation of the cloud. Yet in a recent survey of 200 global senior IT executives, only 35% of organizations report they have fully achieved their expected outcomes from cloud, and 65% identified security and compliance risks as the most frequent barrier. So to get the party started, what are your thoughts? And we'd like to hear from each of you in turn. So what are the most important things, and this is a question to everyone, what are the most important things to consider before you move to the cloud? Nneka?
All right, thank you, Morgan. And hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our session today. So very excited for this topic. I think it's very important we talk about this. Your very first question is probably the most important question. What should you consider as you move to the cloud? So I would say the first thing is the cloud is no mean feat to move to the cloud. It's a lot of planning, it's a lot of decisions. But what we've seen is the key thing you should be asking yourself is really, what is your why? I know it might sound cliche, but really that's the key thing, because you need to understand what the benefits you want to derive from the cloud are. So you might be looking to move to the cloud because you want to streamline your operations and lower costs. You might also be looking to do that because you want to be more agile and this out as soon as possible. Or it might be for innovations. Maybe you want to use all the cool things in the cloud, like AI, ML, artificial intelligence, and machine learning capabilities. So whatever that why is, it has to be fully understood and documented, because that is how you start to gauge your success as you get into the cloud. And I think, Morgan, if you had asked me this question before COVID, maybe my answer might be slightly different, because before the pandemic, lots of my clients were cloud for them was a consideration, not necessarily the consideration. So it was more of, we need to get there alongside so many other priorities. But I think with the pandemic and just the way things have pivoted, the way users, if you're a company, the users of your application or your website or your customers, the expectations have changed. So you need to evolve with that. So there's a lot of disruptions going on in the market. Some companies have because of the pandemic and all the effects from it. So there's really a push now to get to the cloud as soon as possible, because that's where, if you're hosting your applications there, it's easier for your users to get to the cloud. So you think about, how do they have the same experience that they had when they were working within the confines of your office? So I think that why is very important. The second thing I'll quickly mention is the how as well. So how do you want to use the cloud, right? I think most of us here are probably in the IT space and understand that there are different ways to consume the cloud. So I think upfront is really to understand, do you want to move some workloads, all workloads? Do you want to use the SaaS services, the software as a service? So maybe just get your email hosted in the cloud and you just consume as a service. Or do you want to use infrastructure as a service? So basically move all your technology stack into the cloud and get it hosted there. Or do you want to use a platform as a service and just spin up applications very quickly? So I would say, understand how you want to use the cloud. Understand if you need to use like a multi-cloud scenario. You need to use a little bit of AWS, GCP, Azure, some of those clouds, and maybe you still need to retain some on-prem presence as well. So really that how is going to help you tie back to your benefits and to your why. So I would say those are key considerations.
Thank you so much, NECA. Very, very comprehensive response. Catherine, I'm interested in your thoughts. To restate the question again, in your estimation, what are the most important things to consider before you move to the cloud?
Well, because this is a session on security, here's what I would recommend. I think you need to consider what's it going to be like when you have a security breach. That's the first thing you need to consider. Think all the way forward to when that's going to happen, because it's not if, it's when. And the reason I think it's important to do this is that if you kind of imagine how your organization is going to react to when it finds a breach, who is it who's going to find it? How are they going to find it? How are they going to know what the protocol is for reporting it and fixing it? How do they know who to contact? If it's, your internal security team, how do they know, where this breach, resides and who it belongs to? If you can kind of think through the worst case scenario, because again, it's going to happen. If you think through how you want that whole thing to play out, it's like a dress rehearsal for the way it is going to happen. I think that companies often underestimate the organizational change that has to occur when they move to the cloud. And there's no better test of how that organization has to change and how the whole group dynamics of how your organization is working needs to change. There's no better test of that than reacting to a cloud security breach, because it's going to force you to maybe reconfigure the teams that you've got. Maybe there are whole roles that are missing, and there are probably communication avenues that are not really fully plumbed yet. You need to think through all of your infrastructure. And I'm not talking about, computing infrastructure. It's like the communication infrastructure. It's like understanding the hierarchy of your organization. Who do you contact? How is it going to play out? How are you going to get to solving that as quickly as possible?
Excellent. Thank you very much. Isaac, same question. Your thoughts on most important things to consider before you move to the cloud?
So I think one of the big signs for sure is your people. Having considerations for your people and what impact cloud transformation is going to have on them. Cloud transformation is very big and it can be very scary. Roles are changing, different processes, different abilities are required to manage the cloud and be in the cloud. And, having that communication and that kind of foresight with your people to let them know what's coming, and to NECA's point, why it's coming, how it's coming, so people can be prepared for how to deal with it. If poor communication comes into the people, it's hard for them to accept what's happening, to be more resistant to change. And those are, your people in your organization are what's going to help drive the change and collaborate with, whether it's third-party vendors or just internally, to move forward. And, resistance can occur and productivity can be hindered if they're not fully prepared. And there's not a, strong understanding of what skills are required and what is necessary for the team to be comfortable with this change, and their function. You're on mute, Morgan.
I'm hearing, so a focus on change management, change enablement. Don't forget the people, user experience, bring them along with you. So Wayne, as our zero trust architect, what would you say in terms of what's most important as you're thinking about embarking on journey to cloud? What are the things that must be considered before you move to cloud?
Yeah, thanks. Oh, got an echo there. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Hi to everyone. Two foundational things, come to mind for me. They may sound somewhat simple, but I think they're also very important. And a couple of my colleagues going to touch on them a little bit as well. But from a zero trust perspective, knowing your data, knowing your users, right, are two of the foundational things. So when I say knowing your data, ensuring that your data is identified and classified, you know exactly what you're moving into the cloud. So you're not taking, moving junk, from on-prem, into the cloud, right? And in terms of knowing your user, ensuring that there are well-defined roles and responsibilities, well-defined access requirements. This will allow you to understand what you are protecting and who should have access, which is extremely important to implementing the right type of cloud access model. For users, and this kind of touches on the experience piece that I think that Neka mentioned earlier, right? It's so important to think about the experience in the sense that in many enterprises the data center remains the hub, right, of the enterprise for security, inspection, enforcement. And so if you think about a scenario of a remote user, trying to access a cloud application, first the user is sent to the data center, where the security tools sit, before that request is then sent on to the cloud application, versus taking a more direct path, to the destination, right? This type of legacy approach and architecture does not work well when consuming cloud services. It consistently results in this poor experience for the user, especially for remote users, which we saw in the pandemic. Plus there's also a high cost, right, of buying and maintaining many of the on-premise equipment such as next-gen firewalls and VPNs and secure web gateway and CASBs, right? To facilitate that access via the data center. You can achieve better outcomes by leveraging cloud-delivered network and security solutions such as secure access service edge, or SASE. Ultimately, from my perspective, I think the effectiveness of any solution will be dependent on getting those two foundational items right.
Thank you. Incredibly thorough responses, and no surprises there, folks. I appreciate that. So let's so I do have some questions for you individually. And Wayne, since I'm talking to you, we'll start with you. So thinking about some of the risks you've identified regarding cloud migration. Wayne, in your role as Zero Trust lead, interested in your thoughts on how business should be thinking about securing perhaps not just Azure or AWS or GCP, insert cloud platform, but all of those, considering that we as Accenture have quite a few multi-cloud customers. Are there considerations for multi-cloud that someone that is just standardized on Azure, as an example, would not need to worry about?
Yeah. So another echo. Good question, Morgan. So kind of building on my last answer about some of the foundational things, right? So let me step back just a moment, right? So at its most basic, right, Zero Trust is really an integration of processes and technologies to enable an authenticated user to securely connect to an application, right, to access data that they're authorized to see, regardless of where the user is located, or regardless of where the application is located, right? So if it's on-prem, if it's in AWS, it's in Azure, span, multi-cloud, it doesn't matter, right? That's kind of the premise. It's called Zero Trust because all users, devices, computers, networks, applications are considered compromised by default, until a level of trust is determined, and this level of trust is determined in real time, through validation of the user's identity, and their device. So essentially, we check, IDs of both parties, the user and the application are trying to connect to through what's called kind of mutual authentication. We confirm that the user should have access to the data that they're requesting, and create a secure connection, right, to access the data. The same principles can be implemented within and across data centers, right, for application to application access, right? So leveraging identity, driven access. Well, and frankly, from my perspective, I think moving to the cloud, provides, it's fantastic, right? Because it provides really a greenfield opportunity, to implement the principles, of Zero Trust, without the tech debt, that we often encounter, from kind of legacy, on-premise capabilities. Typically, Zero Trust journey is a multi-year journey, or can be, right, and requires transformation of people, process, and technology. So to ultimately achieve success, it's really important, to have early buy-in, from stakeholders, right? So we recommend that any client seeking or looking to go on a zero trust journey, especially for multi-cloud, right, to first start with developing a strategy and an actionable roadmap. This will define the journey, what zero trust really means for your organization, right, because it's different for everyone, and where to start, how to get started along the journey. That's a common question that we hear from many of our clients. It would also help you to define, the outcomes, for the business, such as, is it simply to, prevent a breach, or is it about, improving, the experience for users, or is it, focusing also on reducing costs? We see some of our clients, taking that kind of a phased approach, to adopting, zero trust, right? So starting kind of with their workforce initially, especially during the pandemic, right, to be able to work from anywhere. Enabling remote work. Next we see them moving to enabling zero trust within the context of the workplace, for remote offices and campus locations. So these enable better access, right, to cloud services for users, regardless of where the user sits, right, if they're in the office or if they're working remotely. Then we see many clients moving it, to their, both their private and public clouds, right, to enable zero trust, for the application workload. So many are really accelerating their time to value by leveraging, the cloud native controls, right, that are, within the construct of the cloud providers, as well as leveraging cloud delivered capabilities, right, such as SASE, which I mentioned, Secure Access Services Edge, which kind of provides a common thread and common a connectivity, right, to all of the various clouds.
Excellent. Thank you, Wayne. Mecca, so talk to me a little bit about how your customers, particularly the CISOs that you talk to, what have they found most helpful in making the transition to cloud? For example, using a partner who's been through this before, bringing perspectives that might not otherwise have had access to. Maybe that's a broader way of saying, what are they calling you for? And what are some of the, talk about some of the initial conversations that you're having with security officers as they begin to think about journey to cloud.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say my mention of pre-pandemic and these times we're in, the conversation has really changed. Before pandemic, there was this whole, should I move to the cloud? I wouldn't have the same control as I had on-prem. So the CISO was basically in this whole limbo where they were like, I want to move to the cloud. The business wants to move to the cloud, but we don't have full control of the cloud. So what do we do about cybersecurity? However, recently I have actually started to have discussions where our clients are seeing more of the cloud as an enabler. Like, let's move to the cloud because it makes security easier. It makes compliance, it makes regulations easier to get to. So there's a bit of a change there, which is very welcome actually, because the system is a terrible time trying to keep up. However, I would say that in any case, with all that, moving to the cloud is not an easy exercise. So yeah, having that right partner that advises, having a real migration strategy. I see there was a question in the chat around, would you lift even the legacy environment to the cloud? What do you do? So this is an opportunity for companies to really sit down and analyze what they need to take to the cloud. What are those crown jewels, those assets, those key critical environments you want to move over to the cloud very quickly. So the quick wins for you. And then maybe the other ones, as they come end of life, you can start to drop them and move the workloads on them into the cloud. So really having that full migration strategy is very important. However, I'll mention two other things. And one is the cybersecurity, having a framework for that. So what we have on-prem, where we have all our workloads, we have our stack inside our data center, and we could lock it, it's under lock and key. So we know where the person who holds the key is. It's not the same now. We're moving to the cloud. So it's very important we understand how to map controls from on-prem scenarios into the cloud. So first of all, sit down and understand what you need to move to the cloud. Then how do you place the controls so that you're abiding by the same regulations? It might be different regulations for the cloud actually, so understanding that as well. But I think having an overarching framework of cybersecurity is going to help make sure that you are tying it all back to the reason why you're moving to the cloud. And then the second thing I'll mention is automation. I think for the CISO, security has been like afterthought, right? We get to security when we get to it because it slows us down. That's not the case these days. So the CISO, it's on him to make sure that security is upfront, right? If we're building an architecture for the cloud, it's secure by design by default. Because once we start to make security easy to get to, then people can actually use it. I remember when moving to COVID times and people had to move to VPNs and work from home, people started to switch off VPNs because it was just too hard for them. Like they didn't like the extra authentication. It wasn't easy. And, so they would trade security for that experience. So really for the CISO is understanding how to merge the two, make security upfront, make it easy, and just make it by default. So I think automation helps a lot in that, using things like your infrastructure as code, things that make it easy to deploy. If it's scripting languages, Terraform scripts, things like that. We use it to just make that deployment very straightforward and secure.
Thank you. Catherine, if I could only implement one tool for cloud security, that is my year one budget on my journey to cloud, only let me do one thing, what should that one thing be?
So my answer to this has changed a lot over the last few years, especially in the last year and a half. Mostly because I used to develop tools for cloud security, and for years my answer would have been use my tools, right? And so seriously, because I've been in this position, I've been always on the lookout for the third-party vendors and who's got the best solution here. Okay. And a very interesting thing happened, when we hit COVID and companies said, okay, we have to go to the cloud. The providers themselves got really wise to the fact that there was this whole piece of the pie that was going to third-party vendors of security products. And you have to understand that the big providers here, they're after world domination. Make no mistake about it. So the providers themselves got really smart to this and thought, okay, this is an inflection point for, the whole industry. Everybody's moving to the cloud. If we don't get this right, the onus could fall on us, and this could, be the end of our business. So my answer today would be research what the providers themselves have to offer, because they've gotten really smart about saying, okay, we have to make it painfully easy. As Neka was referring to, you have to make it so easy for security not to become a hindrance. And the providers have gotten smart about doing that. So they themselves offer a whole bunch of things, look for things like security guardrails, security best practices, any sort of cloud native mechanism. Do your research on what the providers offer rather than going to an intermediary, because whenever you go to another tool, you're potentially leaving a window of opportunity there for a security breach. And I think the providers, again, because they're so motivated to get this right, they're really motivated right now. They're so motivated to get it right that they're putting a lot of money into, and a lot of thought and a lot of innovation into how to make things secure themselves. Now, there's a caveat there, which is that the providers themselves have it's like they looked around and said, what can we do for security? Okay, let's grab this, let's grab that. And they've kind of put together their best tools in a package, and sometimes those tools are redundant and they can create some white noise. If tendency is, oh, let's just turn all this stuff on. And if you turn it all on, you're not going to be able to do anything in the cloud. And then, people will be saying, hey, wait, we were going to move to the cloud for agility, and where's my agility gone? So, you do have to watch out for that. You do have to pick and choose and be very careful about which of the cloud provider tools that you're using. But in general, I think it's better to just take a look at whatever sort of offerings are the easiest to implement. I'd also put in one final plug for, I know this doesn't sound like a tool, but all of the providers have something that they call org management, or Azure calls it scaffolding. And what it is it's kind of like a conceptual model in the cloud of how your organization is going to use the cloud. And that becomes a really important tool for everything that you do subsequently for security. So even though it's not thought of typically as a security tool in and of itself, I think that's a really important thing to consider, because it can make or break the rest of your solution.
Well, I mean, it certainly sounds to me like there are a lot of choices that you could make when it comes to thinking about cloud security. Fortunately, I know at least one great partner that folks can ask questions to, right? Isaac, so Catherine's talked about a little bit about the plethora of tools and how the tools landscape for cloud has evolved, and how the CSPs, the cloud service providers, have evolved their perspective on what good looks like and what they should be offering to their customers from a security perspective. In my experience in the cloud arena, there is one phrase that is just inescapable, regardless of what security conversation you're having, and it is couched as the panacea to cure what ails you in the cloud space, and that's CASB, which is an acronym, and which a lot of people don't really even know what it stands for. What is CASB? What does it mean? What does it stand for? What is it good for?
So CASB, when we say CASB, we're talking about what's called a cloud access security broker. And the market for that really developed when, with organizations all going to cloud rapidly, but multiple providers providing different services that were unique to certain clients' niches and what they desired, cloud sprawl started occurring. Clients are leveraging multi-cloud environments, like, for the development tools like a GitLab, Azure DevOps, or they're using, AD over here, and they're using AWS APIs for Kubernetes clusters and GCP for big data. And the sprawl became hard to manage, and in line with Wayne's topic around zero trust security as well. How do I know who's using what? What am I even using? Sometimes we lose track of that. You have different organizations using different cloud providers for different reasons. And CASB is meant to really be in between your users and your cloud providers, to inspect that traffic, inspect the usage, and provide capabilities really at 4 different layers. And the reason why it comes up so much is because it covers a lot of core aspects fundamentally in security. The 4 kind of domains we're talking about is around like visibility, who's using what, and what are they using and why, inventorying your cloud services, what users are doing it. Are they managed users, unmanaged users? Compliance purposes, there are many controls that want you to ensure that you are auditing your users and auditing the data transit between your users and the cloud. You also have data security. Where is my data? Who's accessing what data? What kind of DLP controls can I have on that to ensure that a user doesn't anonymously pull out data that they're not supposed to? And then threat protection. With so many cloud providers, I don't want to have a malware propagate across all of them if something gets detected, whether on-prem or in the cloud, vice versa, right? I don't want cloud to get malware and then have that infect on-prem or the other way around. So CASBs really are meant to provide those protections at those different layers, and different CASB providers have different capabilities and different kind of controls around that, as it is inspecting a lot of data. So, really working with your vendors and understanding what they provide and whether it fits your model for your organization is a key there. But, yeah.
Wow. Thank you. I mean, I am learning quite a bit here, and I want to take this time to Actually, you know what? I have a follow question. This is for anybody who is interested in answering it. Um, talking about CASB, are there any risks or challenges to implementing something that sounds, to the layman, like it's tracking a lot of data, keeping you informed about who's accessing what, when, and where from? I mean, is there a downside to some of the capabilities of CASB?
So I would say in the sense that there is a lot of data being used, and it really comes down to making sure the groundwork is done with your vendor to understand what protections do they have. Some vendors, it's been very common now to start getting FedRAMP certified, ISO 27001 certified. And it's really key for organizations to ask those questions. What are your compliance certifications? Show me the badges, show me the documentation that prove that you are protecting my data. And because you're really offloading a lot of that responsibility and have to make that acceptance. Another piece of the puzzle is depending on how that data is coming in, you could obfuscate that, right? If it's, any API tracking data for users that need to be segmented. And that really comes from more of a functional use case defining when you're working with your CASB vendors to understand, hey, what data are you actually going to take from me or need from me to do your job? And is any of that data that I'm providing, is that something I can safely obfuscate without impacting negatively your function as a tool? So there are drawbacks from having so much data in, but there's ways to mitigate that by ensuring that there are appropriate certifications that your vendor has, as well as taking any mitigations to obfuscate data that may be deemed too sensitive to even provide to your CASB provider.
Thank you. So now I do want to open up the floor to I see some observations have come in the chat. There was at least one early question. Maybe to kind of bring it back to our folks in the audience. Is there how talk to me y'all about your and again, this is at whoever wants to answer. Your journey to cloud security. I'm interested in. There's so many paths that the uninitiated or someone who's new to security could take. Nick, I'm interested. How did you? Are cloud security people born? Are they made?
Well, I think they're born. Then I wasn't born. I actually, my journey in IT, I started off as a networking professional. So I was actually a Cisco person. So doing a lot of networking, routing switches, stuff like that, certifying in Cisco and also delivering along that line. But then started to do a lot more security because it was hard to separate network from security. We just very quickly merged the two, right? So I started doing a lot more network security. And then from there, I stepped, my 2 feet into network security. So really, that was when I became a cybersecurity professional. And from there was a natural migration to cloud security because, again, the power of the network and basically the whole of IT lives in the cloud. So it was just a natural progression to get into the cloud. And for me, I did certify in Google Cloud specifically.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, there seem like there are three big choices that one could make, as they land on a career in cloud security. Catherine, I'm interested to hear how you, because my understanding is your focus is Azure. No, not okay. Correct me then. So do you specialize? And if not, why not?
Hey, good question. Nice pivot there. No, I don't specialize. And here's why. Because it's very easy to get bogged down and into the technical details of implementing cloud security. Mm-hmm. And the fact of the matter is the business problem is the same. And the way you have to handle a situation is the same. I think that the sort of organizational and group dynamic aspect of cloud security is the hardest part of this. It's harder than the technology. It's harder because it takes longer because people don't tend to think about it. And I wanted to go back and sort of answer the question you asked NECA, because I got into security because I was one of the early users of AWS. And guess what? I got hacked. The server that I spun up got hacked. And that's sort of like, it all happened in the matter of a month, for me. Hey, this is really easy getting an account with AWS and spinning up a development server. And it's also really easy to get hacked. So that was kind of my introduction. But then what really drew me in was working for Accenture and being in charge of actually developing the tooling for its own security. It's been fascinating to me watching the organization as a whole adapt to how we handle this. And that's been more interesting than the tooling. Again, the tooling always changes, it's always getting better, but you can't, there's only so far and so quickly you can push an organization to figuring out how it's going to handle these issues. Mm-hmm. So that's why I don't specialize, because it's still, a very large business problem. And I think if you can make that business problem, if you can sort of make security understandable across multi-cloud without getting too bogged down in the details, I think people engage with you a little bit more in their conversation of it.
So thank you for that, Catherine. Wayne, I remember in the very early days of, I guess what I'll call proto cloud, a lot of virtualized infrastructure conversations, and then it became cloud, and I felt like we were always, and may still be to some extent, be having a conversation that may not really be a real conversation, and it is this. We say cloud, we say infrastructure, we say cloud security and infrastructure security. How are they not the same thing? Cloud infrastructure? Is all infrastructure cloud? And then maybe, do we have to think about security? If they are not the same, do we have to think about security differently for those two things?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, Morgan. Traditionally, right, there's a, infrastructure was primarily kind of hardware, focused. Over time, it kind of evolved into kind of software defined. We're starting to kind of see the convergence of hardware and software. Now, as I mentioned before, we were talking about SASE, right, and kind of the evolution of kind of network and network security. We're seeing these capabilities now that they've been software defined, right, now being cloud delivered, right. So a lot of the on-prem capabilities, right, that we typically have, right, are now being offered, right, as cloud delivered services. So there's definitely a convergence happening, and we're actually encouraging it's a part of our approach as we talk about even zero trust, right? To start encouraging our clients to start thinking more about that, right, and start operating within that context, right? Realizing that the typical silos, right, are now being broken down, right, between the CIO organization, the CISO organization, right? It now requires an integrated approach to really, start addressing the needs of, cloud, and zero trust. So yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I mean, the lines are becoming more and more blurred. I mean, the infrastructure is moving into the cloud, right? I think it's all going to become cloud eventually.
Fair enough. So folks, we have just a few minutes left. We actually have a question from Demetrius. Thank you. To whomever feels like taking it, please provide your thoughts on the shared responsibility model of cloud providers. Should the cloud providers take on more responsibility? This sounds like a very philosophical question. I'm sure the cloud providers themselves have an interesting take. What do y'all think?
So I would say for the shared responsibility model, I think fundamentally the ideas are there to ensure that there is accountability. users should be, now they're moving to this like low code, no code kind of model where a lot more is being taken control from the customers, right? It's more the vendors that are controlling that. I think that is a desired state to be able to drag and drop and place things where they need to be. But I think an issue with that, if we move to where cloud providers are taking on more responsibility, is that you really get into vendor lock-in and you're really restricting yourself and being able to be more flexible and customizable with your solutions, which can cause really negative impacts, downstream. You want to be able to maintain that flexibility, and obviously, the CSPs today are way better off than they were 10 years ago. So they're much more equipped to handle issues and SLAs than they were before. But maintaining that level of freedom and not hairpinning, tightening yourself down to a single vendor or even multiple vendors, but locking yourself down to a model where you're unable to have that flexibility and move your data to where it could drastically increase your time to migrate or impact your ability to be more innovative over time. I do think there may be some improvements needed in the responsibility model, specifically around the way SaaS is handled. We still have some items there around how those container images for serverless functions can be managed and distributed for different clients and things like that, and how much more responsibility can be there to ensure that's not negatively impacted. But I do think the level of accountability for customers is there, and a decent amount that is necessary to ensure that enough is protected by the cloud providers and handled, but the flexibility is still available to organizations.
Isaac, thank you. Incredibly thorough response from all of you. Folks, we are at time. To my panelists, thank you very much for making the time to join us. To our guests, thank you for your questions and thank you for joining us. I wanted to encourage those of you who are listening to join us at the career fair at the conclusion, I believe on Friday of BitCon 2021. If you have friends, colleagues, families who are interested in talking to Accenture or understanding more about our, how we talk about security and what our security culture and Accenture's culture more broadly is like, please, by all means, join us there. Reach out to us on LinkedIn, highly available. Thank you for your time today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.